Right now, a new type of computer is being built that could break all internet security overnight. Every password, every bank transaction, every encrypted message you have ever sent, gone. Not hacked the old way, broken mathematically. And the funny thing is, I saw this coming, not because I am some prophet, but because the physics was always pointing here. Let me explain. My name is Richard Feynman. I spent my life trying to understand how nature actually works at the smallest scales. And what I found, what all of us found in quantum mechanics, was that the universe does not behave the way your intuition tells you it should. It is weird, profoundly, uncomfortably weird. And that weirdness, it turns out, is the most powerful computational resource in existence. To understand why quantum computers threaten the internet, you first have to understand why the internet feels safe right now. And to understand that, I want to talk about a very simple idea, the idea of a hard problem. Not hard like a difficult exam, hard in a very specific mathematical sense. There are certain problems where finding the answer takes an enormous amount of time, but checking the answer takes almost no time at all. These are called asymmetric problems, and the entire security of the modern internet is built on top of them. Here is the classic example. Take two large prime numbers, multiply them together. That is easy. Any calculator can do it. Now I give you the result of that multiplication and ask you to work backwards. Tell me the two original prime numbers. Suddenly that is not easy at all. If the numbers are large enough, even the fastest classical computers in the world would take longer than the age of the universe to factor them back out. That difficulty, that asymmetry, is what RSA encryption is built on. RSA is the backbone of secure communication online. When you see that little padlock in your browser, when your credit card number travels across the internet, when governments send classified communications, they are all relying on the assumption that factoring large numbers is computationally impossible in any reasonable amount of time. And for classical computers, it is. We checked. The math works out. A classical machine operating on bits, zeros and ones, has to try possibilities sequentially or in parallel, but always within the hard limits of classical logic. There is no shortcut. The problem stays hard. But here is where things get interesting, and here is where I come in. In 1981, I gave a talk at MIT. I was thinking about something that had been bothering me for years. We were trying to simulate quantum systems using classical computers, trying to model how atoms behave, how particles interact, how quantum chemistry works. And no matter how powerful our computers got, they kept failing. The simulations kept becoming impossibly expensive. I realized the reason. A classical computer works in a fundamentally different logical space than the quantum world it is trying to describe. When you have a system of just a few dozen quantum particles, the number of possible states that system can occupy simultaneously is astronomical. To track all of those states on a classical machine, you need exponentially more memory and processing power. It scales so badly that the whole enterprise collapses. So I asked a simple question. What if instead of simulating quantum systems on classical computers, we built computers that were themselves quantum, computers that do not just represent information as zeros and ones, but that operate in the same strange probabilistic space that nature operates in? That was the seed, and from that seed, everything else grew. Now let me explain what a quantum computer actually is, because there is a great deal of confusion about this, and I find the confusion unnecessary. A classical bit is a switch. It is either off or on, 0 or 1. That is all it can ever be at any given moment. A quantum bit, a qubit, is different. Because of a principle called superposition, a qubit can exist in a combination of 0 and 1 simultaneously, not flickering back and forth, not randomly choosing, genuinely occupying both states at once with certain probabilities associated with each. Now people hear this and they say, oh, so it tries both answers at the same time. And yes, in a loose sense, that is right. But the real power is not just in trying multiple things simultaneously. Classical computers can do parallel processing too. The real power is in what happens when you combine qubits together. When you link qubits through a process called entanglement, something remarkable occurs. The qubits become correlated in a way that has no classical equivalent. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, and he did not like it one bit. But the universe does not care what Einstein liked. Entanglement is real. It is experimentally confirmed. And it means that a system of entangled qubits can represent and process an exponentially large space of possibilities in a way that a classical system simply cannot replicate. 2 entangled qubits can represent 4 states simultaneously. 3 can represent 8. 10 can represent over 1,000. 300 entangled qubits can represent more states simultaneously than there are atoms in the observable universe. This is not science fiction. This is just the mathematics of quantum mechanics playing out. But here is the subtle and crucial point that most explanations miss. The fact that your quantum computer is exploring all those states simultaneously does not automatically mean you get the right answer out. When you measure a quantum system, it collapses to a single state. You get one answer. The art, and it really is an art, of quantum algorithm design is arranging your computation so that the wrong answers interfere destructively with each other, like waves canceling out, while the right answer interferes constructively, like waves reinforcing each other. You are not brute forcing the problem. You are sculpting the probability landscape so that when the system collapses, it collapses to the correct answer with overwhelming likelihood. This is a completely different paradigm of computation, and it is extraordinarily difficult to design algorithms that exploit it properly. Most problems, it turns out, do not have a quantum speedup. You cannot just take any classical computation and run it on a quantum computer and expect it to go faster. The problem has to have a particular mathematical structure, a structure that quantum interference can grab onto. Factoring large numbers, it turns out, has exactly that structure. In 1994, a mathematician named Peter Shor discovered an algorithm, now called Shor's algorithm, that allows a sufficiently powerful quantum computer to factor large numbers exponentially faster than any known classical algorithm. The problem that was supposed to take longer than the age of the universe, Shor's algorithm would let a quantum computer solve it in hours, maybe minutes. When I heard about this, I was not surprised. The surprise would have been if quantum mechanics did not offer this kind of advantage, because the structure of the factoring problem is deeply quantum mechanical in nature. The mathematics of prime numbers and the mathematics of quantum interference turn out to be intimately connected through a branch of math called the quantum Fourier transform. Shor figured out how to exploit that connection. It is one of the most beautiful results in the history of computation. Now, I want to be precise with you because precision matters, and vague fear does not serve anyone. The quantum computers that exist today cannot run Shor's algorithm at the scale needed to break real encryption. Current machines from companies like IBM, Google, and others operate with somewhere between a few hundred to a few thousand physical qubits. That sounds like a lot until you understand the problem of noise. Quantum states are unimaginably fragile. A qubit does not want to stay in superposition. The slightest interaction with the environment, a stray photon, a tiny vibration, an electromagnetic fluctuation, causes decoherence. The quantum state collapses before you wanted it to, before you got your answer. This is called quantum noise, and it is the fundamental engineering challenge of the field. To correct for this noise, quantum computers need error correction, and error correction is expensive. To represent one reliable logical qubit, one that behaves the way your algorithm needs it to, you may need anywhere from hundreds to thousands of physical qubits working together to catch and correct each other's errors. That means the quantum computer that could actually threaten RSA 2048 encryption in practice would need millions of physical qubits operating with very low error rates. Nobody has built that yet, but, and this is the part you should pay attention to, the progress is not linear. It is accelerating. IBM has published roadmaps showing exponential scaling of qubit counts and error rate reductions. Google published a paper in 2019 claiming what they called quantum supremacy, a demonstration that their quantum chip solved a specific problem faster than any classical computer could. The problem was carefully chosen and has no practical applications, and the classical computing community pushed back on the claim, but the underlying hardware progress was real. Governments understand this. The United States, China, the European Union, and many others are pouring billions into quantum computing research. This is not being done because of academic curiosity. It is being done because the strategic implications of whoever builds a cryptographically relevant quantum computer first are staggering. There is even a threat that exists right now today that does not require a working quantum computer yet. It is called harvest now, decrypt later. Adversaries, we can speculate about which ones, may already be capturing encrypted internet traffic and storing it. The data is unreadable today, but if a capable quantum computer is built 5 or 10 years from now, they can retroactively decrypt everything they collected. Every secret shared today could be read in the future. Medical records, state secrets, corporate intellectual property, private communications, all of it sitting in a database somewhere, waiting for the hardware to catch up. This is why the urgency is real, even though the threat is not yet here. Now, here is the part of the story that most YouTube videos leave out, because it is less dramatic but more important. The cryptography community did not sit around waiting to be broken. They got to work. The National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States ran a multi-year competition to develop what is called post-quantum cryptography. These are new encryption algorithms that are designed to be hard for quantum computers to break, not just hard for classical ones. They rely on different mathematical problems, not factoring, not discrete logarithms, the other major vulnerability that Shor's algorithm can exploit. Instead, they are built on problems like the shortest vector problem in high-dimensional lattices, or the difficulty of solving certain systems of polynomial equations, mathematical structures for which nobody, including quantum computers, has found a fast algorithm. In 2022 and 2024, NIST finalized several of these algorithms as new standards. The transition has already begun. Major technology companies are implementing post-quantum cryptographic libraries. The Internet's security infrastructure is being quietly rebuilt underneath you. But here is the honest assessment. The transition is slow. It is technically complex. It involves upgrading billions of devices, servers, and protocols worldwide. Legacy systems, old hardware in hospitals, power grids, financial institutions, government agencies, may not be upgradable at all. The coordination problem is enormous, and cryptographic transitions historically take decades to complete fully. The world is still not fully off SHA-1, a hashing algorithm that was deprecated years ago. These things do not happen quickly just because we want them to. And there is another layer of uncertainty that I find genuinely fascinating from a purely scientific standpoint, separate from the security implications. We do not actually know whether the post-quantum algorithms are truly secure against quantum computers. We believe they are. We have not found quantum algorithms that break them. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is entirely possible that someone will find a clever quantum algorithm that breaks lattice-based cryptography tomorrow. We are working with mathematical conjectures that have not been proven. The history of cryptography is full of algorithms that were believed to be secure until suddenly they were not. This is the nature of the field. It is an adversarial science. You build a lock, someone finds a key. You build a better lock. The cycle continues. Now I want to step back and say something about the broader picture, because I think the quantum computing story, when it is told as pure threat narrative, misses what is actually most significant. The same quantum computer that threatens encryption is the quantum computer that will let us simulate chemistry and biology at a level of detail we have never had before. Drug discovery, material science, understanding how proteins fold, understanding how to design room temperature superconductors, understanding the nitrogen fixation reaction well enough to redesign fertilizer production, which would have implications for feeding billions of people. These are not peripheral applications. These are world-changing capabilities. When I proposed quantum computing in 1981, I was thinking about the simulation problem. I wanted a tool that would let us genuinely understand nature at the quantum level, not just approximate it. The encryption-breaking application came later, and somewhat incidentally. The core motivation was scientific curiosity. The question, can we build a machine that computes the way nature computes? And I believe the answer is yes. The physics says it is possible. The engineering is extraordinarily hard, but it is the kind of hard that humans have solved before when the motivation was sufficient. And the motivation here is more than sufficient. Let me also say something about the fear. Every transformative technology in history has been greeted with versions of the same panic. The printing press would destroy social order. Nuclear energy would make war inevitable and civilization impossible. The internet would eliminate privacy. These fears were not irrational. They contained real insight about real risks. The printing press did disrupt social and religious order significantly. Nuclear weapons did create existential risks that we are still managing. The internet did erode privacy in ways that are still playing out. But the response in each case was not, could not be, to stop the technology. The response was adaptation, new laws, new norms, new technical countermeasures, new institutions. The same will be true of quantum computing. The question is not whether to have it or not. The question is whether the defenses, technical and institutional, keep pace with the threats, and whether the benefits, which are enormous, are distributed widely rather than concentrated. The cryptography community is already working on the defenses. That is encouraging. What I would want to see more of is serious engagement at the policy level, governments genuinely understanding what they are dealing with, not just funding research, but thinking through the governance questions, and serious public education, because a public that understands what quantum computing is and what it is not will make better collective decisions than a public that either dismisses it as science fiction or panics at every headline. You are watching this video, which means you are doing the right thing. You are trying to understand. Let me give you the honest summary of where we are. Quantum computers, powerful enough to break current encryption, do not yet exist. The physics says they can exist. The engineering is being pursued aggressively by multiple well-funded actors. The timeline is genuinely uncertain. Expert estimates range from a decade to several decades, with meaningful probability mass at both ends. The threat is real enough that the cryptographic community has already begun the transition to quantum-resistant algorithms, and that transition needs to accelerate. The harvest now, decrypt later threat means the risk is not purely future. It exists today for information that needs to remain secret for many years. And the same technology that poses these risks also offers some of the most important scientific and medical capabilities in human history. This is complicated. The honest answer is always more complicated than the headline. Anyone who tells you quantum computers will break the internet next year is probably wrong. Anyone who tells you the threat is overblown and we have nothing to worry about is definitely wrong. The physics does not lie. Nature is quantum mechanical at the fundamental level. We have been building computers that pretend it is not, and it has worked remarkably well. But the pretense has limits, and we are approaching them. What comes next will depend on how seriously and how honestly we engage with what the science is actually telling us. I spent my whole career trying to figure out what nature was actually telling us without wishful thinking, without ideology, without the comfort of believing what was convenient. That is the only approach that has ever worked. The quantum revolution in computing is coming. The question worth asking is not whether to be afraid of it. The question is whether we are paying close enough attention to be ready. I think we can be, but only if we start now.